Hi, I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections, and I'm here to tell you today that I have made more mistakes doing home inspections than anybody else on the planet. I know, it's a bold claim, but I've got such a huge list of mistakes I've made, and I wanted to share them with you. The whole idea is that if you're another home inspector listening to this, maybe you can not make some of these same mistakes, and I'm going to do this in the format of always do this or never do that. So I've heard you should never use absolutes, but here goes. I'm going to use a lot of them today. So, number one, if you're going to run a dishwasher, always look inside of it before you turn it on. I once made the mistake of not thoroughly looking through the inside of the dishwasher. I just popped it open, took a quick peek and closed it, and I was about to start the dishwasher. And this is one of those rare instances where the listing agent was actually there during the inspection. He was sitting in the kitchen keeping an eye on things while I'm doing my inspection. And before I start the dishwasher, he comes over and he kindly says, "Oh, wait, before you start it, ha ha ha." That's where the owners keep their laptops. So he opens the dishwasher and pulls the owner's laptops out of the dishwasher before I could run it. Whew, that was such a close call. It really wasn't a dumb mistake I made, but it could have been. That was a close call. So always look inside the dishwasher. Number two, before you turn the oven on, always look inside of it. There was one oven I turned on, I did not look inside. I went to the buttons, I turned it right on, and about 5 minutes later, I smelled something burning. And it wasn't food, it was plastic. And I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a piece of Tupperware or something that was stored in there. But there was a big melted mess and all this black smoke coming out of the oven. Very embarrassing. I paid the homeowner for whatever it was that I ruined. Always look inside the oven before you turn it on. Number three, I gotta print out the list. I can't remember all this. Number three, never leave your keys on the counter. This is such a no-duh item, and all of these are, I guess, but I've done it. I left my keys on the counter, and this was back in the day when we had e-keys. Today, to get into a house, we just use an app on our phone to get in, to open up the electronic lockbox. But back in the day, we had a separate device called an e-key, and we'd have to bring this with us to get into houses. Well, I left my car keys and the e-key on the counter. I went out when I was done with the inspection, I locked the keys in the lockbox, and then I patted my pockets down and realized I left my car keys inside along with my e-key. I had no way of getting back into the house. So embarrassing. Never take your keys out and put them on the counter. Number four, never trust shallow pockets. I've had this happen to me more than once. I'm a slow learner, I guess, where I put my mobile phone inside a sweatshirt pocket, and then I'm walking around doing my thing, and my phone falls out of my pocket. And I've lost my phone underneath a deck. I've lost my phone in an attic before. And the attic time, it was a good thing somebody else was there. They were able to call my phone, and they had to call it like 5 times while I'm crawling around inside the attic, digging for it. And it's at the bottom of insulation. If nobody had been there, my phone would have just been gone forever. So, never trust shallow pockets. Put things in deep pockets. I lost a flashlight in very deep snow when it fell out of my pocket. I've lost a couple of flashlights in very deep insulation. So wherever you're putting stuff as a home inspector, you're going to be jumping around and turning and getting at weird angles. Stuff will fall out of your pockets. Number five, never test a GFCI outlet with a GFCI tester. Seems like you should do this, seems very natural, but every GFCI outlet has a little test button right on the front of the outlet. Trust me, you're going to want to use the test button on the outlet. Don't use the external tester on your remote tester. The problem is that if you have some handy homeowner who decided to do all of the wiring themselves and they knew they needed GFCI protection but they didn't know how it worked, you might have a homeowner who installed GFCI receptacles at every single outlet. I had that happen once. It was in a basement, a finished basement, and I used the test button on my tester, and I heard about 6 clicks all at the same time. And this basement was filled with stored stuff, and there was all this cabinetry and all that. So I tripped all of these receptacles, and I had to reset them all. You always need to reset them, but you cannot reset a tripped GFCI outlet unless it has power. So I had to reset all of these in the correct order, and just finding them took forever. And I must have spent 45 minutes tracking down all of these GFCIs and resetting them in the correct order and moving all these stored items. It was ridiculous. And from that day forward, I have not used the little test button on my tester. Now, when I find a GFCI outlet, I use the test button on the outlet. Word to the wise, never use your remote tester if you don't have to. Number 6. Now, here's where you can use your remote tester. You can use your remote tester for GFCI devices on outlets that are not GFCI, but you want to make sure that they are GFCI protected. You can use that test button on there. But my advice is, if you're going to do that on the outside of the house, make sure that you first have access to the garage. Make sure that the garage is open and accessible. This has happened to me, it's happened to other people on my team, where we go and we use the test button and we trip a GFCI outlet inside of a garage, and the GFCI is what's controlling power to the entire garage. Now the garage doesn't have power, and the only way to get into the garage is through the overhead garage door opener, which is powered by electricity. So now you've disabled the GFCI and you have no way to get inside the garage to reset it, and the homeowners are not going to be happy when they find out that they can't get in the garage. That's your problem as the home inspector. You need to figure out how to get back in there. So again, the never here is never test a GFCI receptacle on the outside of the house with your remote tester until you have access to the garage. Could be a very embarrassing situation. And yep, I've done that. Number 7, never walk a wet wood roof. That's a great recipe to come down the easy way. I was once walking it was a dry wood roof. It was early in the morning, there was morning frost, but the frost had all burned off from the sun. The sun was out and it had warmed everything off, it all steamed up, and it was safe enough, it was just fine, until I wasn't paying attention where I was walking and I stepped in a shaded portion of the roof, which was still wet and frosty, and oh man, I went down so fast. I didn't come off the roof, but I slid, and I think my foot stuck in the gutter, and that's what stopped me from coming off the roof. Super scary. Never walk a wet wood roof. Number 8, never bring your ladder up onto a roof to leapfrog from one section of a roof to another on a sloped section of roof. Now, if it's a peak like this, you can put your legs on either side of it. That's not a big deal, but if it's sloped like this, you can't put your ladder down on here because you're gonna come down the easy way. I've done that a couple of times. I did it maybe the first year I was ever inspecting, and I was much bolder than I am today. That's a euphemism for dumb. I was much bolder than I am today, and I would put my legs on that slope section, and it worked fine a couple of times. First few times I did it, and then one day I did it, and I'm climbing up on that ladder, and my ladder went out from underneath me. And thankfully, I didn't come all the way off the roof. I only landed on the lower section. It was super painful, but I didn't tell anybody about it. Not until today. Number 9, never put your ladder on an icy surface. This is just a no-duh type of thing. It should be, but I once did it. I had it pretty vertical. I was climbing up onto a flat roof, and those feet went out underneath me, and I had just gotten to the top of the roof, and as I felt my ladder slide out, I was able to kind of fall and roll onto that flat roof, and I kept one arm on my ladder so it didn't go down, and I had a way to get back down off the roof. I got so lucky, but that was such a stupid mistake, and I'm proud to say I learned from that one. I have never done it again since. Number 10, never unlock an A-frame collapsible ladder when you're standing on it. Now, I got in the habit of doing this when I would inspect attics, and I'd put my ladder on carpet, and as I'm getting down, I would push the 2 little unlock buttons as I'm climbing down, and then I could collapse my ladder really quickly and easily after I get off of it. And you know, again, if you're on carpet, this works just fine. But then one day, I had put my drop cloth down on hardwood flooring. The attic access was right above me. And I put this plastic drop cloth down to help contain any mess of stuff that might come out of the attic. And it turned into muscle memory. As I'm climbing down that ladder, I pushed the 2 buttons and my ladder instantly did the splits. And it went like this. And it came down fast. I was lucky enough where I was able to kind of jump off to one side and grab my ladder, and it didn't smash onto the ground, but had I been a second slower jumping off of that, I just would have done a face plant on top of my ladder on the ground. I would have been sprawled flat out and probably busted my face. I got super lucky that day. So the lesson there, never unlock your ladder unless you're standing on the ground. That was just plain stupid. Okay, that's the end of this page. Number 11, always unlock exterior doors before you go outside. Now, if I were in charge, you would not have an exterior door, a handle set that has a lock on it. That's something I do at any house I live in, is I remove any doors that lock behind you like that. The only way you can lock a door at my house is by using a deadbolt. So you can intentionally lock it, not accidentally lock yourself out. I think it's just stupid that those things even exist, but they do. And as a home inspector, I have trained myself very well to always unlock that before I walk out the house and close the door behind me, because I don't want to lock myself out. I did lock myself out one time though. I was on a balcony and I had brought my ladder through the inside of the house. I got on the balcony, set my ladder up there to inspect the roof, and then I come back down, I go back inside, and I'm locked onto the balcony. And the buyers were there with me during the inspection. Now, I could have knocked, could have had them come let me in, but that would have been very embarrassing. So I took my ladder and I climbed down over the side of the balcony, and I got down that way instead. I came back inside and we continued the inspection, and they never asked about it. I'm sure they figured out what happened. They're kind of like, why did he come back to the front door? Maybe they didn't pay any attention, but I think more they were just very tactful and they didn't want to embarrass the heck out of me and ask me what just happened. I think they were just nice people. So again, never lock yourself out of a house. Never pull that door closed behind you without checking to see if there's a lock on it. Okay. Number 12, never operate a radiator handle. That's that radiators typically are going to have a handle on them to control heat going in and out, water coming in and out. And back in the day when I used to come across radiators that weren't functional, I wanted to be a super helpful home inspector. And I would turn those radiator valves and I'd open it up, and then I'd wait a little while and I'd make sure it heated up, and I'd go, yep, it still works, okay, good. And then I'd shut the heat back off diligently, until one day I opened one of those valves and the valve started leaking and it would not stop. And I got my wrench and I tightened the packing nut and I did everything I could to get that to stop, and it would not stop leaking. It just kept dribbling out of there, constant flow of water. So I had to get my towels out of my truck and constantly sit there and keep mopping it up and try to finish my inspection and keep coming back to this soaked towel and wring it out every 5 minutes. It was such a hassle, so embarrassing. And I ended up having to call another inspector on my team who came to the house with all this magic plumber's tape and all these things you see as sold on TV. He brought me like everything they had at the store, and we used all this tape and putty and all this, and we got it all put back together to the point where it wasn't leaking anymore, and we didn't touch it again. But that took like 2 hours, added 2 hours onto my day. And I had heard this in training that you should never operate these valves, but I had to learn for myself the hard way. Hopefully you will learn from me. Okay, number 13, never walk in the middle of attic cross bracing. Now, that might be tough to follow, so I got a picture here. This shows the aftermath of what happened to me the last time I walked in the middle of attic cross bracing. It's that stuff that helps keep trusses from moving side to side. It's typically supposed to be installed in bigger attics. Now, I was walking on this cross bracing and I stepped on a portion of it that basically had a knot about the size of the 2x4. It filled up the whole space. I was standing on it for just a second and I went down. I went down hard and fast. And what broke the fall was my armpit, which was over one of the trusses. I kind of slid down that way. You should have seen the bruise all up underneath here. And it was also my shin landing on the bottom cord of one of the trusses. It was a big fall. I went down quite a ways. That was super painful. All I could do was just sit there and moan for a few minutes after it happened. And in the process, I also punched a hole in the ceiling with my knee. My knee didn't come all the way through, but I wrecked the ceiling and had to pay to get it fixed. What a hassle. What a stupid, incompetent home inspector who's walking around in the attic and puts a hole in it, right? Yeah, I've done it. But lesson there is if you're going to walk around on that cross bracing on trusses, you walk on the part right where it's fastened to the truss, not in the middle of it. And for goodness sakes, look out for knot holes. Okay, that was number 13. Number 14, never step on the bottom cords of trusses if they're buried in insulation. Now, I feel like I've made a video about this or told the story before, but there was one home where I was walking around in the attic and I was stepping on the bottom cords of the trusses, which were just barely buried in insulation. Normally, I'm not going to walk around in an attic and leave big footprints in the attic, but in this case, the insulation was just a little bit deeper than the trusses, so I felt comfortable walking around. What I didn't realize was as I was doing this, I had accidentally put my foot on a plumbing vent, and the plumbing vent pushed down on the slip joint connection at a bathtub much lower down in the house, and it made that slip joint connection disconnect. So you know what happened when we filled the bathtub and then emptied it to drain all the water, right? It's not funny. That was an insurance claim, made a big old mess, and we had water pouring out of the ceiling in the garage down below. That was dumb. So if you're going to walk around in an attic and you're going to put your feet on the bottom cords of trusses, make darn sure you can see exactly what you're stepping on. Otherwise, don't do it. Learn from my mistakes. Number 15, never forget about a filling bathtub. I'll say that again, never forget about a filling bathtub. If you're filling up a bathtub, either stay in the room and watch it fill, or set a timer on your watch or your phone for 5 minutes and come back and check on it, or use a high water alarm, something that's got some probes that go into the tub, so once the water gets to a certain height, it's going to sound off an alarm. Do something to make sure you don't forget about a tub filling. How do I know? I have forgotten before. I wrecked a house. No, I didn't wreck a house, but I caused an insurance claim because I forgot all about it. I was training another home inspector, and we didn't realize my mistake until we had got down to the basement, and we had water coming all the way through the house. And you might think, well, don't they have those overflows? Those overflows are worthless. I don't know what those overflows are there for, but the water is going to come out of your spout faster than it's going to drain through the overflow. Do not count on that overflow to save the day. It will not. So never forget about this. There's more I could tell you about this story, but man, this one should be the top of the list. That was unquestionably the most embarrassing thing I've ever done as a home inspector. It really made me question whether I was cut out for this. And I had been inspecting houses for about 8 years at that point when I did this. And yeah, it still feels a little bit raw, and it was a long time ago. So never do that. Number 16, always make sure you're at the right house. I have inspected the wrong house before. I've done it more than once. And these were circumstances where it seems like it should be understandable. I get the house address, and I know who the listing agent is, and I pull up to the house, and there's the sign in the yard, and then I type in the lockbox combination. This is before we used E-keys and you could get into any house, but I'd type in the lockbox combination, like HOT or something, and then it gets me in. It's like, okay, yeah, I gotta be at the right house. It matches all the description I had. Well, it turns out the right house was 3 doors down. And then I had another situation that was somewhat similar. I've done it before, I've done it more than once, and I surely would not if I would take a little bit more time and make 100% sure that I'm at the right house. So, word of the wise, always make sure you're at the right house. Have a system of checks and balances. Number 17, never put an extension ladder on top of your vehicle without immediately securing it. I remember when I was a new home inspector, and it was probably one of the first times I had ever brought my extension ladder to a house. I took it off my vehicle, I inspected the heck out of the roof, put it in a bunch of different places, I put it back on my vehicle, and now at this point the clients are there and they're watching me do all this. And I didn't want them to watch me fumble with my tie-down straps and just try to figure out exactly how to fasten it and take up 5 minutes while they just stare at me. And so I thought, well, I'll come back to this later. I'll wait till the inspection's over and they leave, and I'll fasten it down later. Well, of course, I forgot to fasten it down later, and I'm driving down the road and I see my ladder starting to slide off my roof rack. Bad day. It never did completely slide off. I was able to pull off. I wasn't on the freeway or anything, so nobody died, but it could have been really nasty. That could have caused a horrible accident. It surely would have ruined my ladder. Never put your ladder on top of your vehicle without fastening it down right away, because you'll forget. And that brings us to number 18, never leave tools out of sight. I think the first tool I ever left at a house was my little giant ladder. How the heck do you leave a little giant ladder? It's a big ladder. How do you leave that at a house? Well, I was doing stuff in the backyard with it, and I left it in the backyard thinking I'll come back to it later and I'll grab it. Of course, I forgot. Had I simply taken the time to bring it around to the front yard and I leaned it out there, I would not have driven off. I would have seen it before I left. And I have lost so many tools. Like I have left my laptop at a house before. I've left good flashlights at a house before. I've left countless hand tools. I've left sunglasses. Can't remember what else. Surely a heck of a lot more than that. And it's all about having a system, and if I'm going to set something down for a second, put it down in a place where I need to step over it or step on top of it to get back out of the house. Anytime I do that, I'm good, and I don't have any problems, and I don't lose any of my tools. But if I put it on some shelf behind me out of the way, that's probably the last time I'm ever going to see it again. I'm going to completely forget about it, and then I'm going to be at some other inspection a week later, and I'll say, hey, where's that tool of mine? And I'll have no idea when I last used it. So, don't lose your tools. Number 19. This one, I think I probably don't need to share this with anybody. Nobody's going to be this stupid, but I'll share it anyway to tell you how stupid I am. I attended this class on inspecting heat exchangers once, and I ended up learning how you could pull the blower motor out of furnaces and basically crawl inside the furnace and get all up in there and inspect the heck out of the heat exchanger with mirrors and flashlights. And it was a good way of diagnosing cracked heat exchangers. And I started finding a lot of cracked heat exchangers, and I got really good at it, and I could pull that blower motor out pretty quickly and put it all right back together. Until one day, I pulled the blower motor out and I didn't realize that there was a high limit heat sensor on the back side of the blower. And when I pulled the blower out, I disconnected the wires to it. So when I put it all back together, the furnace did not operate again. And man, that must have taken me a solid hour to get to the bottom of why the furnace would not operate. And all the while, I think my clients were there watching this bumbling idiot that I am try to get their furnace flipped back on. It's the last time I ever did it. If you're a home inspector, stay in your lane. Don't go dismantling equipment. Leave it alone. So the never here is never pull blower motors out. Never dismantle furnaces to do the inspection. You're there to do a visual inspection. Maybe you can use some equipment, maybe you take the covers off and all that, but don't go dismantling stuff. And then finally, number 20, never operate a natural gas appliance that's connected to a propane source. Now, what am I talking about? Well, there's two different common types of fuel that we got here in Minnesota. We've got natural gas, we got propane, and natural gas has about half the energy of propane. So if you've got an appliance like, say, a kitchen stove, it'll be the same stove, but it'll have a much smaller orifice if it's going to be propane gas coming in, because propane is so much hotter. Well, if they don't make that switch, if you've got the natural gas orifice, you're supposed to have propane, but you've got propane coming into this big hole. Well, it's going to be much more energetic flames on the stovetop. And I'll tell you what happens in the oven. It means that you've got all of this energy being pumped in. It's not going to burn it fast enough. So the oven starts to heat up, but then you get all of this gas building up inside the oven that's not being burned. But you don't have the right fuel to oxygen ratio, and so it's just going to keep building up, building up, building up. Well, I encountered this once. I knew it was wrong because when I turned on the burners, the flames were really yellow and big and aggressive, and they're dancing like several inches up in the air. And I went, oh, I know what happened here. It's set up for natural gas, but they got a propane source. And then I opened the oven door, and all of that unburned gas ignited. It was an explosion. I think I lost a lot of facial hair with that one. I yelled, and it was a boom. I mean, that was one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me during a home inspection. What I should have done in retrospect is turn off the gas to the burners, turn off the gas to the appliance, and leave the door shut. So, again, the takeaway, if you've got the wrong fuel connected to a gas appliance, turn it off as soon as you realize it. Never operate it. Okay, that makes up my list of possibly the top 20 dumbest things I've ever done. That's surely not all the dumb things I've done. I've got a much larger list that I could come up with, but this is a good start. And man, this was a long blog post. I thought this was going to take me 10 minutes, but it's a lot of storytelling. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope some people learn from some of my mistakes. And for the record, before you say, I'm never calling this company, I don't do inspections in the field anymore. All I do is tell stories like this. The people who work in the field at my company, they're far smarter than I ever was. They don't make these types of mistakes. Okay. That's it. I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed some of these stories. Take care.